Chosen Season 4, Episode 7, The Last Sign, is officially available in the Chosen app for everybody to watch from the comfort of your own home. In this episode, we get the last miracle that Jesus does before he is crucified and resurrected, and it's really, really exciting. This episode was really good, and today I'm going to give you 5 things that you might have missed from this episode, and we're going to talk about it today. So hello, my name is Eli Hollingsworth. Welcome back to Against the Current, The Chosen podcast, the biggest podcast about the Chosen TV series. And let's go ahead and roll that intro.
I can't believe it. Oh, you worked so hard and for so long. This will be a treasure for all time.
I'm here to see about that. It will outlive us.
So first up, let's talk about that flash forward at the beginning of episode 7. So we get a scene between Matthew and Mary Magdalene where this takes place in the future after Jesus has died and resurrected, and Matthew has just completed his gospel writing of the events of Jesus' life and ministry. This scene is super interesting, and there are a few notable details for us to point out here. First of all, we get reference to the Apostle Paul, which is very exciting. That's a character who we should see popping up soon in The Chosen, and we might start to be wondering, who he's going to be and who he's going to be introduced as here in The Chosen, since he was definitely, at least around when Jesus was around and doing his ministry. But we also get a reference to little James's death, which is very sad, but we also get a reference to his wife and daughters, which is interesting. But The Chosen chooses a tradition where he was ran through with a spear in Lower Egypt by King Agrippa. And there's a few conflicting, stories on how it's kind of unclear how little James died. This is, one of the prevailing theories is that this is how he died was in Lower Egypt. This is one of them. Some people are unclear whether to connect James the Lesser, who is little James, with James, the brother of John, son of Zebedee. So I think that gets confused with their deaths every once in a while. Where in the book of Acts, we learn that Big James was beheaded. We don't really know from the Gospels how little James died, but this is the tradition that remains, and I believe is the most popular theory as to what happened to little James. So cool to get that detail there in the scene between Matthew and Mary. Very interesting, super beautiful. And this probably takes place around 60 AD. Anytime we get these flash forwards in The Chosen, always a super great moment. And hey, if you like what you see here on my channel, I talk about every episode of The Chosen more in depth in my podcast, linked down below in the description, where I talk through every episode of The Chosen, share my full, candid thoughts on every aspect of them, not just the highlights. Here on YouTube, I try to stay pretty positive and just talk about the major stuff. But if you listen to my podcast, you can hear all of my in-depth thoughts and my thoughts on every little intricate detail here in The Chosen. So if you want to check that out, link down below in the description.
So, what did you mean last night about going to Lazarus?
I said what I said.
But next up, let's talk about doubting Thomas. As Jesus and his disciples are on their way to Bethany for Jesus to go heal Lazarus, we get some scenes of the disciples talking to each other. And John is walking with Thomas and asks him what he means when he said what he said at the end of episode 6. This is actually directly from the Bible in John 11, where in verse 16 it reads, "So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him,'" referring to Jesus saying, "Let's go to Bethany." Now, in the Bible, it's unclear what Thomas's tone was when he said this. Some people thought he was being sarcastic, and since later, he gets the title of being Doubting Thomas, being like, "Oh, let's go die with him," sure that he's gonna die. But he also could have been saying, "Let us go valiantly pursue, follow him to the ends of the earth," type thing. Good gusto. But in the context of The Chosen, it seems pretty clear that, in order for their narrative to work, they had to have him say that in a negative way. So that was interesting to see, because it could have easily been both ways. Again, the tone of his voice here is not exactly clear, but it makes more sense for him to be sarcastic, especially with the context of the story going on. So that's an interesting moment, but John is asking Thomas about what he meant by that line. Thomas is obviously feeling the weight of what's going to happen with Jesus and Lazarus, because he believes that Jesus can do anything, so he knows that he's going to raise him from the dead. This is where The Chosen does a great job of pursuing Thomas's story, and as soon as Raymond was killed in episode 3, I was thinking, well, when Lazarus is raised at the end of the season, I'm sure Thomas isn't going to be happy about that, and this is exactly where The Chosen is going, and how they explore this story is just so well done. Exploring Thomas's deep, emotional storyline here in this season and his progression of that, it's all super well done. Joey Vahidi, who plays Thomas, he does a phenomenal job in this season. He's amazing. his performance as Thomas, really, really well done. And Thomas's character in this episode the story is super, super good. Alright, let's talk about who this guy is. So in the scene when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, which was a phenomenal scene, super well done. When Jesus says, Lazarus, come out, I get chills every time I watch it. I've seen it 3 times now, and it's super, super awesome. But there's this guy watching on in a blue robe who we don't exactly know who he is. We've seen him in set photos from season 5. We know he's going to be a big part of next season. And we don't exactly know who this guy is. We never learn his name. Nobody talks to him. He's just there. And then he goes. He could be a messenger for Nicodemus. I know the popular fan theory is that he's going to be Saul, aka Paul the Apostle. This is his introduction in the show. So I honestly have no idea who this character is going to be. But this does lead me to ask you to leave a comment down below on your theories and your thoughts about this episode. Because it's not just about what I think, right? It's about what you think. I want to hear from you guys. So, who do you guys think this mystery blue character is going to be? Is he going to be someone super important, or just like a messenger for Nicodemus, or just some random guy or something? I don't know.
Not this side of...
This side.
Now let's talk about Jesus and Lazarus. This scene after Jesus has resurrected Lazarus, which, again, super epic scene. The way that played out was so awesome and perfect. As we all know, The Chosen would be, this scene was just amazing, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. Truly, truly well done. But a scene that was just as well done is the scene afterwards with Jesus and Lazarus, where the Chosen is kind of exploring the inevitable aftermath of Lazarus still being around. What would that look like? A guy who was dead for 4 days and then gets resurrected. Very, very interesting. The Chosen doesn't exactly dive into. Lazarus doesn't say what he saw. He doesn't say what he experienced, which is smart on the Chosen's end, because you don't really want to get into that kind of stuff. But we do get this scene with Jesus and Lazarus, where Jesus also tells Lazarus what's going to happen, where he's going to die and be resurrected, and he doesn't exactly specifically say it to him, but Lazarus also doesn't understand, and Jesus is becoming more frustrated with the amount that people lack understanding about what he's telling them. He truly is, looking at him, and he's like, I can't, you don't understand either, and Lazarus says, I'm only human. So, just a great scene, one of the Chosen's best scenes between Jesus and Lazarus here, super emotional, where Lazarus says he doesn't want Jesus to die. And then, of course, after that, we get the scene with the disciples all arguing with Thomas. Super cool stuff. And this scene with Jesus and Lazarus was really poignant and, a man of sorrows. That kind of theme continuing here, where we see Jesus becoming frustrated with people not understanding. We saw that earlier in the episode. This scene was just really well done and very emotional. It tugs at your heartstrings, where Jesus is talking to Lazarus about the reality of what's going to happen.
I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die.
And let's talk about some honorable mentions here. I am the resurrection and the life. So when Jesus and his disciples come to Bethany, they come to see Lazarus and his sisters. Martha comes out to Jesus, and she says, if you were here, my brother would not have died. This whole scene is from John 11, and it was really well done here, and I love what Jesus says to Martha here. Starting in verse 21, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. I mean, talk about a profession of faith. Peter gets all the credit for his, but I don't think Martha gets enough credit for her profession of faith. This is very clear here. She very much believed that Jesus was the Son of God. This is really, really good stuff. And the scene with the Bethany sisters and their performances here are great, phenomenal, where they're weeping and they're sad over the death of their brother. Jesus, what he says to Martha is just really, really great. And how they tie it in with Thomas standing there listening as well. Just this scene was awesome. And I'd love to see it here. And for our other honorable mention, we got to talk about Jesus wept. So right after the scene with Martha, in the same scene actually, Jesus says, "Where have you laid Lazarus?" And they say, "Come and see." And in the shortest verse in the entire Bible, 2 words, John 11:35, reads, "Jesus wept." The performance from Jonathan is phenomenal here. Jesus wept because he loved Lazarus. Lazarus was one of his closest friends, as portrayed in The Chosen. In the book of John, it says Jesus loved Lazarus and his sisters dearly. So Jesus is saddened over the fact that Lazarus is dead. He himself cries over Lazarus being dead. Even though he's about to go resurrect him, Jesus still weeps, which is, just disgusting, ugly, immense crying. And we see this here in The Chosen season 4, and it's portrayed so beautifully by Jonathan. He's just a phenomenal actor. He nails it every single episode. And this scene was just so cool to see, and I loved it here in The Chosen season 4.
Darkness is not the absence of light. That would be too simple. It is more uncontrollable and sinister.
But finally, we got to talk about that ending monologue from Mary Magdalene. So for the end of our episode here, we flash back forward to the future with Mary and Matthew, and Mary says that she wrote a psalm of her own to commemorate what she remembers happening in the life of Jesus and in the events that we see portrayed in the Gospels. This is not meant to be like Mary wrote her own kind of scripture, as the director Dallas Jenkins says, but more like I'm sure the other people who were with Jesus or saw the things that happened from the most revolutionary person in history, wrote something down themselves, not just the four apostles who wrote the Gospels, right? But this monologue is so great. Written by Tyler Thompson, one of the writers from The Chosen. He just has such a poetic mind and just writes so beautifully. So as soon as I heard this scene, I knew he had written it because he is phenomenal writing this kind of thing. Everything in it, when we're seeing flashing to the characters as we see them going along, and we're gearing up for our season finale here. We just see the music is awesome. I love the music. It gives me chills. Just weighing in the reality of the bitter and the sweet, which is kind of the theme of season 4, and how good things happen, and also there's a lot of sad things mixed in with the good, and how all of that ties together in the Christian walk is all so beautifully done. And it's so just everything that's said in this monologue is amazing. It's just so beautiful, and it's just the art of storytelling. In this TV show, this is like a real art moment, So that ending monologue was so beautiful, written by Tyler Thompson, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of the best. It's probably the best monologue in the whole show. It really made an impact, and it's just such a gut punch ending to this episode, as we see all the characters kind of dealing with the events that have just happened. So there you have it. There are 5 things that you might have missed from The Chosen Season 4, Episode 7, The Last Sign. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to let me know what you think of everything I shared down below in the comments. Also, what did you think of this episode? It was a lot of people's favorite episodes, up there in the Mount Rushmore of Chosen episodes. It's definitely really, really good, and Lazarus' resurrection is so massive, and this episode really, portrays that. It's a huge moment and a huge event. So I really enjoyed this episode. Be sure to let me know what you thought, and check out some other videos on my channel. I promise if you like this one, I've got more like it. Be sure to keep up with all my Chosen news that I'm going to be sharing here, and to subscribe if you haven't already, and comment and like. And I will see you guys in my next video. Binge Jesus.